Before the chariots roll through the forum, before the cries of the vendors rise with the sun, before the Senate gathers, the temples awaken, or the city stirs, there is a man in the shadows of Rome, already at work. His name may never be etched in marble. He holds no office, leads no legion. And yet, without him, the eternal city would go hungry. This is not the story of emperors or battles. It is the story of grain and fire, of hands powdered with flour, of mornings steeped in silence, and ovens lit before dawn. This is the quiet rhythm behind the grandeur, the heartbeat beneath the marble. This is a day in the life of a Roman baker. Before the sun crests the rooftops of Rome, a silent world stirs in darkness, and in this hush the baker walks alone. The city is still. The warm winds of the night have not yet shifted into day. No birds call out, no merchants shout. Only a husha, great gentle husha, covers the eternal city like a woven woolen cloak. Beneath the shadows of cracked roof tiles and frescoed courtyards, the Roman baker pister, as he is known in Latin, rises from his straw mattress. He does not yawn, for this hour belongs not to sleep. His body knows this time. It has woken this early for many years, long before Rome stirs. He rises by habit, by rhythm, by something ancient in the bones, a pact between man and labor. Around him, the room is still cast in indigo light. A low oil lamp flickers near the doorway, giving off a faint aroma of smoke and olive oil. His sandals, worn and dust-colored, rest where he left them the night before. He slips them on without a thought. The cool leather molds to his feet. A rough woolen tunic, simple and girded with a belt of rope, wraps loosely around him. He pauses only for a moment before stepping out into the city. The streets are not yet alive, but they are not dead either. There is a low murmur in the air, the kind that ancient cities seem to hold in their stone, even when no voices sound. The paving stones, uneven and worn, glistened faintly from the dew. A light mist clings to the narrow alleys, softening the harsh outlines of tenements and shop fronts. The baker's footsteps are steady. He does not carry a torch. He knows this path well, even in the dark. He walks past the insulated apartment blocks with wooden shutters closed tight. Somewhere above, a baby whimpers and a dog stirs. But no doors open, not yet. To the west, the smell of river moisture drifts in from the Tiber. To the east, a faint scent, barely noticeably, yesterday's charcoal fires, clings to the walls. It is not unpleasant. It smells of work and of the city's breath. A cat slinks past his legs and disappears into the shadows. The baker does not stop. He turns down a quieter alley, passing under an archway carved with chipped letters. Ahead lies his destination, the pistrinum, the bakery, his workshop, his temple. The pistrinum is a modest structure nestled between a dye shop and a herbalist's stall. The plastered walls are streaked from years of use, but the painted red lettering above the door remains. Panem bonum hic confissimus. Good bread is made here. He pushes open the heavy wooden door, and the familiar scent hits him at once. Ash, stone, yeast, a faint tense of flour that never leaves the air. The interior is dark, but the baker moves easily. A single oil lamp hangs from the ceiling, casting a flickering glow on the stone walls. On one side of the room, a broad work table stretches from end to end, scattered with linen cloths, wooden bowls, and clay measuring cups. On the far side, the great oven furnax waits, like a slumbering beast, its wide mouth black and cold. For now, in the adjoining chamber, two large metaconical grinding stones sit mounted on a circular platform. Around them, millstones wait to be turned. In some bakeries, donkeys walk these circles endlessly. In others, human slaves do the work. In his bakery, a young man named Daphnis, still asleep in the small rear room, will soon wake and take his place at the mill. But for now, the stones rest. The baker sets to work. First, he examines the grain stored in large woven baskets, spelt, emmer, and hard wheat from the estates beyond the city. Each has a different coarseness, a different yield, a different bite. He runs his fingers through the baskets slowly, feeling for moisture or stones. Today, he chooses a blend mostly wheat with a little emmer for softness. He pours the grain into the funnel atop the meta, then checks the pressure between the stones. Too loose, and the grind will be coarse. Too tight, and the stones may seize. A small adjustment with a wooden wedge, a nod of approval, and it is ready. As he turns to light the first fire in the back hearth, the door creaks softly, like a whisper of familiarity. Daphnis, the young apprentice, appears, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Salve," the boy murmurs. The baker nods. No more is needed. With practiced ease, Daphnis begins to walk the circle, hands on the guiding beam, as the millstones grind and rumble into motion. The sound is ancient, rhythmic, earthy, a music older than the city itself. Flour dust begins to rise into the air, catching the lamplight in soft golden clouds. The baker kneels before the furnax, the great domed oven made of thick masonry. Its belly is blackened from countless firings. He brushes the ash from the stone floor, then arranges a bed of kindling dried olive wood, some small twigs, and a few curls of barks, saved from yesterday's delivery. With a flint and iron striker, he coaxes a spark into the kindling. Slowly, patiently, the fire catches. The flames lick at the stone walls, throwing orange light across the dark interior. The oven will take nearly 2 hours to reach baking temperature. It must be hot enough to radiate heat long after the embers are cleared. The entire chamber must be brought to life, every brick, every curve of the dome. As the fire grows, the baker stands nearby, warming his hands, listening to the hiss of sap, the occasional pop of wood. It is not a roaring fire. It is a whispering one, a slow breath that will, in time, become a heartbeat. The flour is ready. Daphnis has filled a large wooden trough with the day's grind. It is warm to the touch from the friction of the stones. The baker inspects it, testing with his fingertips for consistency. Then he reaches for a clay jar fermentum, a bit of sourdough saved from the previous day's batch. This, more than fire, is the soul of the bread. He mixes water drawn from a nearby cistern and left overnight to lose its chill with the fermentum. Then he slowly adds it to the flour, folding and kneading with large, deliberate strokes. The room is quiet, save for the soft squelch of dough, the crackle of fire, and the turning of the millstone. Kneading is not rushed, it is meditative. The dough resists at first, then yields. The baker's arms move in a practiced rhythm. Pull, press, fold, turn. Every movement has a purpose. Every push brings air and life into the mixture. Daphnis watches, occasionally dusting the table with flour. He is learning not from words, but from the repetition of gesture, from the patience of the master. Once the dough is smooth and elastic, it is covered with a linen cloth and left to rest. This is the in-between time, the time of stillness. The fire roars higher now, its light flickering across the ceiling beams. The baker sits on a small stool, wiping his brow with a cloth. The sweat is not unpleasant, it smells faintly of flour and smoke. He listens, not to voices, but to the quiet breathing of the bakery, the slow, low grind of stone, the rhythmic creak of wood, the hiss of sap from the olive logs. Outside, the city remains mostly asleep, though distant footsteps can now be heard. Perhaps a water carrier or a priest making early rites. A rooster crows somewhere in the hills. The dough rests, it breathes, it rises just a little like a sleeping child, and the baker waits with it. The earliest rays of morning sunlight begin to stretch across the rooftops of Rome, their golden warmth creeping slowly over the dusty cobblestones and the tiled awnings of modest insulae that cluster in close quarters. As the light spills into the narrow alleys and markets, it gently filters into the domus of Marcus the baker, a man whose hands are already deep in the sacred rhythm of the morning and ancient ritual of transformation, where the simplest of ingredients becomes the nourishment of an empire. Inside the Domus bakery, known as a pistrinum, the day unfolds not with noise or clamor, but with the rustling of sacks, the hush of breath, and the earthy aroma of milled grain. Marcus has lit the small oil lamps hours before dawn, casting flickering shadows across the clay walls and the heavy wooden beams that frame his workspace. These lamps are more than sources of light. They are guardians of the quiet sanctity in which bread is born. He stands before a long wooden table, its surface worn smooth by decades of labor, etched faintly with flour-dusted grooves from 1,000 yesterdays. Upon it rests a large stone bowl, simple and unadorned, but imbued with meaning. This is where the ritual begins. The flour, the soul of the bread, is not taken for granted. Marcus uses wheat ground on the premises, milled by the heavy grindstones turned patiently by donkeys. The scent is rich, nutty, almost sweet, the kind of smell that draws the mind to golden fields swaying under the Mediterranean sun. The grain has journeyed far. Some of it comes from Etruria, some from as far as Egypt, where the Nile floods gift fertile black soil to vast farmlands. The wheat, threshed, dried, and shipped in sacks along Roman trade routes, ends its journey here within the soft hush of Marcus's pistrinum, where the mundane becomes divine. He lifts a clay scoop carved from olive wood and lets the flour fall into the bowl. It lands in gentle clouds, like ash from a sacred flame, drifting and settling, filling the silence. He breathes it in not too deeply, for flour, like fine dust, has a way of clinging to the inside of the nose, catching the breath as if to remind the baker that all things in the kitchen require respect. Next comes water clear, cool, drawn from the aqueduct-fed cistern just beyond the courtyard. Marcus pours it slowly, letting it pool in the center of the flour, forming a shallow crater. The balance of water and flour is not exact science. It is intuition, memory, touch. It is ancestral wisdom passed from father to son, from mistress to servant, through repetition and reverence. But no bread rises without the sacred life of leaven, the fermentum, a bubbling starter carried from day to day, born of flour and water, left to the air, to wild yeast, and to time. Marcus keeps his starter in a clay jar covered loosely with a linen cloth. It has a sour, complex aroma, sharp, a little fruity, alive. He spoons a portion into the well and watches as it begins to dissolve, merging with the water, threading itself into the mixture with invisible fingers. This leaven is the heart of the ritual. It carries forward the spirit of past loaves, of meals shared and labor honored. It is the bridge between days. Now comes the act of bringing it all together, the mixing of flour, water, and leaven into a unified whole. Marcus plunges his hands into the bowl. The flour resists at first, dry and reluctant, but the water coaxes it inward. With each turn of his wrists, each pull and fold, the dough begins to form a rough, sticky, living mass. His fingers, long used to this task, know the exact pressure to apply. Not too hard, lest the dough tighten prematurely. Not too gently, or it will not bind. This is not merely labor, is communion. The dough speaks to him in its resistance and stretch, its warmth and texture. He listens. The sounds in the bakery are minimal. The soft slap of dough against wood, the creak of a stool, the faint whistle of wind through the half-shuttered window. Outside, Rome begins to stir, the call of vendors, the clop of hooves, but here all is still. The dough rests now under a damp cloth, and Marcus wipes his hands on his apron with care. Not haste, never haste. The resting phase allows the dough to hydrate, the gluten to begin its silent weaving. When Marcus returns to it, he lifts the soft mass from the bowl and places it on the floured board. He begins to knead, not with violence, but with rhythm. Press, fold, turn. Press, fold, turn. Kneading is like music. The tempo must be steady, the pressure firm yet loving. The muscles of Marcus's arms flex in slow motion, shaped by decades of baking. He works not for speed, but for feel waiting, until the dough is smooth, elastic, and lightly tacky, like a cat's paw. This process takes time. It cannot be rushed, nor should it be. The bread knows when it is ready. Sometimes Marcus hums as he kneads a low, wordless tune he cannot remember learning, only that it came to him one morning, years ago, in the stillness of the bakery. A song for the dough, perhaps, a lullaby for yeast. Once kneaded, the dough is set to rest again, placed in a bowl, rubbed with olive oil, and covered with a linen cloth. This stage is the first fermentation, where the leaven works its magic, feeding on sugars, producing air, stretching the dough gently upward as if it breathes. Marcus sets the bowl near the warmth of the hearth, not too close, not too far. He watches the dough with the patience of a priest tending sacred flame. He knows the signs, the slight puffing, the tiny blisters of air beneath the skin, the way it sighs when pressed lightly with a fingertip. During this wait, Marcus tends to other quiet duties. He checks the firewood, stacked neatly by the oven. He oils his baking tins. He sips watered wine and watches the light move slowly across the walls. Rome is waking now. He can hear the carts on the road, the calls of the fishmongers near the Tiber, but he remains here, within the sanctuary of flour and fire. The dough is growing, slowly, rising like a sun within its own small world. When the dough has doubled, Marcus returns. He tips the bowl gently, releasing the mass onto the floured table. It deflates slightly, letting out a soft exhale. With a bronze scraper, he divides it precisely, respectfully, to portions. Each piece will become a loaf, a small circle of sustenance. He shapes each one with care. For some, he forms round loaves, panis, quadratus marked with deep lines to aid in division. Others he twists into plaits, or flattens slightly for rolls. The Roman bread must not only taste well lit, must hold beauty, symmetry, intention. A meal, after all, begins with the eyes. Each loaf is placed in its own vessel or left bare on flat trays. Before the final rise, he sprinkles some with seeds, poppy or sesame, or brushes them lightly with oil. This is not indulgence, it is respect. The bread is for soldiers, merchants, children, and gods alike. Another rest, another silence. The dough, shaped and waiting, sits in gentle warmth, wrapped again in linen. This stage proofing allows the loaves to relax, to become light and open within. Marcus knows better than to disturb them. He moves softly now, his voice low, his steps slow. Even the fire respects this time. He prepares the oven, feeding it carefully, testing its heat by holding a hand just within the mouth of the dome. The Roman oven, a low stone dome with a wide floor, retains heat like a dragon's belly. When the coals are ready, he rakes them to the side and sweeps the floor clean. And then, before the loaves meet the heat, Marcus pauses. He looks over them, hands lightly dusted with flour, eyes calm. Each loaf holds a story, a whisper of water, a breath of wild yeast, a memory of a morning long gone. He closes his eyes briefly and offers a silent prayer, not to a specific god, but to the process itself, to grain and soil, to fire and time, to the hands of all who have ever kneaded before him. Then, with slow care, he places the loaves into the oven. One by one, the heat rushes in. The crust begins to form, and the ritual is nearly complete. But the story does not end here. The bread must be watched, turned, judged by smell and color, by the hollow sound it makes when tapped. There is no timer, only instinct. In the next chapter, we shall follow Marcus as he draws the bread from the oven, lays it out to cool, and begins the process of distribution, feeding his neighborhood, honoring contracts with local vendors, and sharing the fruits of this ancient craft with the beating heart of the eternal city. But for now, we remain in this moment, in the silence of rising loaves, the warmth of the oven, and the heartbeat of a man who through flour and water, fire and patience, keeps alive a tradition as old as Rome itself. The warmth of the oven wraps itself around the bakery like a blanket. The air is thick with the mingling sense of smoke and earth, of rising crust and toasted grain. Here, in this sacred interval between raw and done, Marcus becomes more than a baker. He becomes guardian of the fire, a silent witness to the transformation wrought only by heat. The domed oven for Nax has been burning for hours. It is built from stone and clay, curved like the inside of a cupped palm, its mouth wide, its belly deep. The Romans understood heat. They understood how to trap it, how to harness it, how to balance it, just so enough to bake, not to burn, enough to sear, not to scar. Inside the oven, flames have danced and died, leaving glowing embers nestled in the corners, their heat soaked into the stone walls, like sun into sand. Marcus stokes the last of the coals and checks the color of the oven's interior. It is pale and chalky now, a sign that the stone is hot enough to bake. He sweeps the floor clean with a long-handled brush made of bundled reeds, each movement gentle and precise. The rhythm of baking has no room for haste. It is a tempo that resists urgency, that rewards stillness. The doughs, now proofed, shaped, and serene, rest quietly on wooden trays. They no longer resemble raw materials. They are full of air and intention rounded, marked, glistening slightly from oil or water, ready to meet their final test. Marcus selects a wide wooden pila, flat paddle with a long handle and slides it beneath the first loaf. With the smooth confidence of long practice, he eases the dough into the mouth of the oven. Then deeper, turning the handle slowly to nestle the loaf just where the heat is strongest but not fierce. He repeats this again and again, placing each loaf a careful distance from the others, forming a constellation of bread on the hot stone floor. As each one enters, it begins to change almost immediately. The outer skin tightens, a sheen forms, steam rises in invisible wisps. The scent warm, rich, ancientin folds in layers, drawing even the attention of passers-by on the street. Children pause near the open window. A neighbor's cat sits on the windowsill, tail flicking. Even the pigeons in the alley seem to lean a little closer. Marcus closes the oven's mouth with a stone slab, leaving a small gap for air to pass. The loaves will bake in radiant heat, crust forming from the outside in, the inner crumb expanding, swelling, firming. There is no sound here but the crackle of wood, the gentle hiss of steam, and Marcus's own breathing. Time passes in slow curls, like smoke. Marcus does not rush this part of the day. Instead, he observes. He crouches near the oven and listens. He knows his loaves by sound, the soft crack as crusts begin to split, the hollow ring when they are tapped with his knuckles. He knows them by smell. The moment when flour becomes bread is marked not by sight but by scent. This is when his artistry shows, not in mixing or shaping, but in knowing when to draw the line between baked and overdone. Too soon, and the loaves will be pale, underproofed. Too late, and they will be hard, dry, fit only for breadcrumbs. One by one, he begins to extract them. The peel slides beneath each loaf, lifting it out from the heat and into the open air. They are transformed, now golden brown, some speckled with seeds, others cross-marked in the Roman style. Their crusts are firm to the touch, but light, ready to crackle under the first bite. Marcus lays them in rows upon cooling, rack-slotted wooden shelves where air can pass above and below. Here the bread rests, and here, too, the baker rests. He pours himself a small cup of watered wine and leans against the wall, watching his work. It is a humble triumph, but a complete one. As the loaves cool, they speak in whispers, tiny cracks, and snaps as the crust settles and contracts. It is the bread's final song, a quiet gratitude, a reminder that it lives even after fire. Marcus closes his eyes and listens. Cooling is as much a part of baking as kneading or proofing. Bread removed too soon from heat is doughy inside. Bread sliced too early while hot will tear and steam, its structure still forming. Patience here preserves the integrity of all the labor before. In this stillness, the bakery glows. Sunlight now bathes the room, having climbed fully over the rooftops and into the street. The marble threshold of the door gleams faintly, and dust motes drift through shafts of light like flour in suspension. Outside, the market awakens. Buyers and sellers shout softly, dogs bark, and carts roll over stone. The day is fully alive. But here, in the warm heart of the pistrinum, time slows once more, allowing space for pride, for peace, for breath. Bread is not hoarded. It is made to be shared, consumed, carried off in baskets, or eaten warm at the table. Marcus understands this. He sets out the finished loaves in their respective places, those for the market vendor, those for his regular clients, those for the nearby tavern. Each order has its own shape, quantity, crust. There are also small, rough loaves, simple and unmarked, meant for the poor. Roman bakers often gave away unsold or intentionally made extra to offer to those without coin. Marcus places these aside with care. The act is not charity in the modern sense, it is duty. Rome runs on grain, but it breathes through bread. His apprentice, a wiry boy named Flaccus, arrives to help carry the first baskets into the alley, where early customers now begin to gather. An old woman with a clay coin in her fist, a merchant on his way to Ostia, a pair of tired legionaries home on leave. Each greets Marcus with familiarity, sometimes a jest, sometimes silence. To each he gives a loaf, wrapped in linen, or placed directly in hand. Payment is exchanged, or promised, or not given at all. It is all part of the unspoken contract. Amid the many loaves is one small round, brushed with honey and spelt flour, its top scored with delicate marks. This one is not for a customer. It is for the shrine. Marcus steps into a small alcove near the rear of the bakery, where a shelf holds a tiny household altar, figures of Vesta and Fernax, the hearth goddesses. He places the loaf before them, lights a thin stick of incense, and bows his head. "Domine," he murmurs, "accept this offering, that the fire may remain steady, the loaves good, the hands strong. It is a moment of gratitude, not superstition. The gods are part of the household as much as the oven or the peel. The ritual is part of the bread itself. With the first rush complete, Marcus allows himself a rest. He washes his arms in a basin by the door, removes his flour-caked apron, and steps into the narrow courtyard. Vines creep along the walls. A fountain trickles softly into a stone basin. He sits on a low stool and stretches his back. From the wall hangs a bunch of dried rosemary and bay, used to scent the bakery. He crushes a sprig between his fingers and inhales. The smell sharp, herbal cuts through the warm heaviness of the morning. A single sparrow hops into the basin for a bath. The world slows again. Not everything in Rome is marble and marching. Some things are dough and dawnlight, silence and steam. The city is a body, and the bakery is one of its beating hearts. Later, in the afternoon, a few loaves are sliced. Marcus shows Flaccus how to examine the inner structure of the bread. He breaks one in half and shows him the open holes, the sheen of moisture, the softness balanced by strength. Not too dense, he says, and not too light. The bread must hold together, even when dipped in oil. They eat pieces with olives and sheep cheese. Simple fare. But to Marcus, it is more than food. It is the fruit of time, of care, of communion. Every slice contains the whole morning. By evening, the bakery quiets again. The ovens cool, the baskets are empty, the floor swept. A few loaves are left for supper, and the leaven is fed mixed with new flour and water, to sleep overnight and wake strong in the morning. Marcus cleans his tools, oils the wooden handles, folds the linens. He checks the door locks, the grain stores, the fire embers. All is ready to begin again. Because baking never truly ends, it only rests. The ritual of fire and loaf is not dramatic. It is not inscribed in marble or written in history scrolls. But it is the foundation of the city, of all cities. And in the quiet hours of dusk, as the shadows lengthen and the sky turns a dusty purple, Marcus the baker stands once more before his hearth, breathes in the lingering scent of flour and ash, and feels for just a moment that he is part of something eternal. As the sun arcs past its zenith and drapes the eternal city in warm, slanted light, the streets begin to swell with rhythm. A hum awakens in the alleyways, where peddlers call out over barrels of olives and figs, and laundry flutters like soft flags between the upper floors of insulae. The forum pulses with senators and scribes, matrons and merchants, each carving out their own place in the daily machinery of Rome. And yet, beneath the politics, the markets, the rituals of empire, there is another pulse, quieter but vital. It is the movement of bread, not merely food. Bread is Rome's daily miracle. And Marcus, the baker, like hundreds of his kin across the city, becomes not just a craftsman of dough, but a node in a vast and living network. His loaves, fresh from the oven, are no longer simply nourishment. They are a current within the bloodstream of civilization. This is the chapter of movement, of exchange, of humble loaves making their way through the city by hand, by cart, by memory. It is the story of delivery, ritual, and the invisible path of sustenance. After the mid-morning rush and the sacred hush of cooling, Marcus begins the first distribution circatus panis, the bread circuit. He and Flaccus, his young apprentice, prepare wicker baskets with linen linings. Loaves are arranged in tiers, each type placed with care. Round panis quadratus for the fishmonger, long rolls for the tavern, coarse country loaves for a nearby stable yard. The baskets are balanced onto a hand-carta simple wooden frame with 2 wide wheels and a plank base. It creaks softly as they begin to push it down the alley, Flaccus guiding its nose, while Marcus walks beside, one hand steadying the topmost loaves. The first stop is just 2 streets away. An older woman, Cassia, runs a street-side stew shop. She serves garum-lessed lentils and salted goat to the workers who pass by in midday. She greets Marcus with a toothless grin and a cackle. "Still warm?" she asks, lifting one round loaf from the basket and pressing it to her cheek. Marcus nods, barely out of the oven. She slips him a handful of bronze coins and a folded fig leaf filled with dates, a quiet gesture of gratitude. Not payment, but a gift. This exchange bread for bread, favor for favors, the unseen grease in Rome's wheels. They continue down the Vicus, the narrow neighborhood lane, delivering to homes and shops. A family of potters receives a stack of rolls. An old soldier nods and takes his loaf with solemn eyes. At each door, Marcus is greeted not as a tradesman, but as a fixture, a bringer of something that binds life together. In the early afternoon, a second route begins. This one is longer, reaching beyond their immediate neighborhood. For this, Marcus hires a small mule cart driven by a former legionary named Lartius. The cart is painted with a faded red sunburst, and its wooden slats bear years of scratches, each mark a story of cargo and journey. They load the cart with loaves, destined for 2 different thermopolia hot food shops, sand for a wealthy household in the Subura, where a steward collects bread for the domina's private meals. The streets grow louder here, busier. The smell of hot oil, wine, and horse dung mixes with the lingering perfume of fresh bread. Vendors shout, dogs bark, children dart between carts. But even here, amidst the chaos, the bread moves in its quiet dignity. Lartius knows the way. He winds the cart past the baths of Titus, through the shadow of the Esquiline Hill, and toward the bustling market district. Here, Marcus must speak with the steward, a tall, fussy man who inspects each loaf as if it were a coin. "You are early," the steward says, but he takes the bread anyway. "It is better than being late," Marcus replies, smiling. There is no friendliness in the steward's eyes, but Marcus does not mind. He delivers. That is enough. To understand these roots is to understand Rome itself. The unknowna, the state-sponsored grain supply, ensures that thousands of tons of wheat enter the city each year, funneled in from Sicily, Egypt, North Africa. The frumentori, the grain agents, track its storage and flow. But the final stage, the transformation from grain to sustenance, lies with the bakers. Loaves fan out from hundreds of pistrina-like veins from a heart. Each neighborhood depends on its own rhythm, and each baker, like Marcus, becomes both servant and sentinel of his district. The wealthy have their bread delivered, sometimes with honey or dates baked in, perfumed with saffron, or shaped with emblems. The poor queue at communal ovens, or accept rough crusts offered by local temples. In the military camps and public granaries, bread is rationed, counted, weighed, but always, always it is there. To be without bread is to be unmoored. The Panem of Panem, e.t. Churchence's bread and circuses is more than slogan. It is necessity. The state can fail in many things, but never in bread. Or so the people believe. Every baker leaves a mark, a small, distinctive stamp pressed into the top of the loaf before baking. Marcus's mark is a stylized M within a circle, flanked by 2 sheaves of wheat. It identifies his hand, his craft, his promise. Bread is too vital to go unclaimed. Stamped loaves trace their path across the city, recognizable in market stalls, homes, and even temples. When famine strikes or grain is scarce, these marks help officials trace the flow. When fraud is suspected, the stamp is proof. When love is offered, the mark is remembered. In the Forum, children carry stamped loaves from home to school. On the Palatine, slaves slice stamped rolls for noble banquets. And in the tenements of the Subura, fire-warmed hands press flatbread marked with initial symbols of pride, of neighborhood, of daily rebirth. As the day bends toward evening, Marcus returns to the bakery with a lighter cart. A few loaves remain, one for a neighbor whose son is sick, another for a widow who couldn't pay this week. He makes these stops last. In the hush of twilight, the bread feels heavier, not in weight, but in meaning. There is something deeply human about sharing food when the day is done. He hands a still warm roll to a boy sitting on the steps of a shrine. The child smiles, then runs inside to share it with his mother. No words are exchanged. None are needed. Back at the Pistrinum, Marcus tallies the day's notes. He writes in a wax tablet, carefully marking 32 loaves sold at Market 18, delivered 2 clients, forgiven without coin, 1 loaf reserved for Vesta's shrine. He scrapes the tablet clean and rewrites tomorrow's baking list based on what he saw, heard, felt on his route. A merchant asked for double tomorrow. A sick child prefers soft rolls. A tavern will host soldiers in the morning. The bread speaks even after it's gone. As night drapes its shawl over the city, the sounds fade, the distant clop of hooves, the murmur of fountains, the lull of drowsy voices. The bread roots fall silent, but the memory of them lingers in the crumbs on a merchant's beard, in the warm scent on a child's hands, in the satisfaction of an old man eating by lamplight. Marcus leans on the doorframe of his bakery and watches the moon rise behind the rooftops. Tomorrow, the ritual begins again: grain to flour, dough to loaf, loaf to city, and always it moves, quietly, faithfully, like a river of sustenance winding through the empire. The sun has reached its zenith and begun its slow descent toward the western hills of Latium. The streets of Rome hum with a different rhythm, now a quieter, steadier beat, as citizens retreat to shaded atriums and vine-draped peristyles, seeking rest and respite after the heat of midday. For our baker, whose day began long before dawn. This hour is not a time of idleness, but of transformation. The hard work of mixing, kneading, and baking has passed. Now, the fruits of that labor take on new meaning, crossing the threshold from sustenance to celebration, from the oven to the banquet. The pistrinum is no longer filled with the clatter of amphorae and the scent of raw dough. Now, a different aroma rises, the warm, toasty perfume of baked crusts cooling on wooden racks. Loaves with golden tops rest beside sesame-seeded rings, and carefully marked round breadsome for temples, others for feasts await collection. One by one, customers arrive, their linen tunics rustling softly in the afternoon breeze. A young servant girl comes on behalf of her domina, bearing a bronze coin and a folded cloth. She selects a plump, honey-glazed libum, a sweet cheese bread that will be placed on a small household altar in thanks to the Lares, the spirits of the home. Another man, older and slow-footed, comes to collect his daily ration course barley loaves for the insula's poorer tenants, subsidized by the grain dole. And then come the messengers. From the villa of Gaius Aemilius Scaurus, one of Rome's more prominent patricians, a young steward arrives bearing a wax tablet and a message. A banquet is to be held that evening to honor a visiting consul and celebrate the return of his son from service in Hispania. The baker is to prepare a variety of breads, soft white rolls of the finest triticum, large round loaves marked with symbols of the gods, and trays of delicacies, placenta cakes layered with honey and crushed nuts, and savia, small pastries laced with wine. The baker nods solemnly, his hands already in motion as he reviews the request. This is not simply commerce, it is a ritual of prestige, of tradition, of honoring the Roman way through hospitality and food. In ancient Rome, to be invited to a banquet convivium was more than a social gesture. It was a calculated display of hierarchy, culture, and power. The quality of the meal, the guest list, the entertainment hall were orchestrated to signal the host's refinement and wealth. And at the center of this display was bread. More than a humble foodstuff, bread was the symbol of civilization. To present fine bread to guests was to align oneself with the divine order of Rome itself, with Ceres, goddess of grain, and Ops, the goddess of abundance. The feast might include roasted dormice, oysters, stuffed figs, and spiced wines, but no table was considered complete without the varied forms of baked grain that spoke to Roman identity. As the afternoon progresses, preparations for this banquet begin in earnest. In the rear of the pistrinum, the baker's wife and her sister grind dried rose petals and anise into a sweet paste to fill tiny pastry shells. The baker's son stirs honey into flour and eggs to make a soft dough, pressing it into carved wooden molds that will imprint the cakes with designs of grapes, wheat, and amphorae. For the patrician's table, nothing short of perfection will do. When the breads are baked to perfection, golden brown, with crisp crusts and soft, springy interiors, they are wrapped in cloths and packed gently into woven baskets. A pair of household slaves, sent from the villa, arrive with a cart. They bow respectfully to the baker, lift the fragrant bundles onto their shoulders, and begin the journey back to their master's home. The villa of Gaius Aemilius is a grand affair, its entrance flanked by Corinthian columns, its walls painted in rich ochres and reds. Within, a team of cooks is already at work, roasting meats on open flames, reducing wine into syrupy sauces, slicing fruits into elaborate displays. But even among these opulent preparations, the bread will have pride of place. The triclinium, or dining room, is arranged in the traditional fashion, 3 couches in a U-shape around a low central table. Guests will recline on cushions, eating with their fingers and wiping them on woven linen cloths. Slaves will circulate with platters, offering morsels of food and pouring watered wine into silver goblets. The baker's loaves, still warm, are sliced and arranged with care. Crusty brown panis militaris is placed beside soft rolls made from sifted white flour. The guests, many of them former military officers, senators, or wealthy landowners, will dip the bread into sauces, scoop up pureed beans, or simply savor its warmth and aroma. To understand Roman bread is to understand Roman life. In poor households, a coarse loaf eaten with oil might be the only sustenance of the day. Among the working classes, bread was a shared staple, broken into chunks, eaten hastily, and washed down with watered wine or a handful of olives. But in elite households, bread became a marker of social status, the whiteness of the flour, the complexity of the shapes. The ingredients used all reflected one's place in the Roman hierarchy. Spelt for the commoners, emmer for the soldiers, and the finest siligo for the aristocrats. Special occasions saw even more extravagant varieties: bread braided with herbs, sweetened with honey, or filled with dried fruits and cheese. On feast days, temple offerings included libum, mola salsa, and other sacred breads that were believed to carry the blessings of the gods. And during a banquet, like the one unfolding tonight, the bread is not merely eaten, it is admired, discussed, even praised in verse. Poets might compose short couplets to honor a loaf's perfect crumb or a pastry's delicate scent. As evening deepens and the last delivery is made, the bakery grows quiet. The baker, now with flour still dusting his arms, sits on a worn wooden stool. He gazes at the cooling hearth, its embers glowing softly in the darkened room. A bowl of lentil stew rests in his lap, and beside it, a thick slice of bread coarse, simple, and comforting. He breaks the crust with his fingers and dips it into the stew. The flavors are earthy, unpretentious, nourishing. This is not the refined bread of patricians or sacred altars. This is the bread of labor, of muscle and sweat and discipline. And yet, it holds just as much dignity, just as much tradition. Outside, the city moves to its twilight rhythms. The cries of vendors fade into the hum of conversation. From distant courtyards, the soft notes of a lyre drift on the breeze. In homes across the city, from marble villas to humble tenements, bread is being shared. It is broken and passed between hands, dipped into sauces, eaten in silence. It is both food and memory, ritual and survival. It binds together families, strangers, generations. In Rome, bread is more than nourishment. It is a thread that connects every part of society, From the granaries of Alexandria to the hearths of the Aventin Hill, from the soldier's pack to the philosopher's desk, from sacred rites to evening meals, the baker does not attend the banquet, but his presence is felt there in every crust, every crumb. He is not named in the praises sung over dinner, but without his labor the feast would be hollow. He is the quiet craftsman behind the ritual, the unseen hand shaping not only the dough, but the rhythms of the city itself. As the stars emerge in the Roman sky and laughter rises from candlelit villas, the baker lets out a long breath. Tomorrow, before dawn, he will rise again. The millstones will turn, the ovens will blaze, and once more bread will journey from flame to feast, from hand to hand, carrying with it the timeless story of Rome. The sun has vanished behind the hills of Latium, and the sky above Rome deepens to a dusky indigo, streaked faintly with the last whispers of amber and rose. The roar of the day quiets. The clatter of carts and footsteps fades into the muffled murmur of conversation. In the heart of the Subura, the bakery stands in a kind of exhausted peace. The great stone oven, once roaring with the heat of midday, now glows softly, embers blinking like dying stars at its center. The day's final chores have been completed. The long wooden paddles have been leaned against the wall. The millstones rest, silent and unmoving. A broom leans against the threshold. The baker moves slowly now, his steps heavy, his hands no longer swift but measured, careful, tired. He rinses flour from his arms at the basin near the doorway. It is not just the end of a workday. It is a sacred moment of transition, the slow unraveling of labor into rest, the dissolving of tension into stillness. The baker exhales deeply, a breath that carries the weight of fire, grain, and motion and welcomes the calm that follows. Rome does not sleep with the setting sun. Even as homes dim their oil lamps and courtyards fall quiet, life continues in subtle pulses throughout the city. Their conversation, low and slurred, punctuated by occasional bursts of laughter. But in the baker's world, the rhythm of night is slower, more deliberate. He sits near the hearth, a small clay cup in hand. Inside it, Posca, a simple drink of vinegar and water, sometimes with herbs, a drink for workers, for soldiers, for the practical. He sips it slowly, feeling its sharpness on his tongue, the way it awakens the palate even in fatigue. On the table, a modest dinner is laid out, a bowl of stewed lentils, a piece of cured fish, some olives, and of course bread, always bread. This loaf is no longer warm, but its crust still sings when broken, revealing a dense, moist interior. He tears a piece, passes it to his wife, then his son. They eat in near silence, not because they have nothing to say, but because the day has already spoken in full. The flour under their fingernails, the aching of their backs, the warm pride in a basket of finished loaves, these are their language. In every Roman home, the hearth is more than just a source of warmth, or a place to cook. It is sacred. Here, at the edge of night, the baker kneels before the modest household altar beside the hearth, where small terracotta figurines of the Lares and Penates stand. These spirits guard the home and ensure the prosperity of the family. A bit of bread is crumbled and placed before them as an offering. A candle is lit. A whispered prayer is spoken. May the grain be plentiful. May the fire burn strong. May our labors feed not only our stomachs, but the hearts of those who come to our door. The fire is fed with a final handful of kindling, not to cook or bake, but to ensure it does not fully die in the night. A live ember must remain, so that the flame can be rekindled at dawn without starting anew. This ember is watched closely, like a heartbeat. The baker's wife hums a lullaby tune passed down from her mother and her mother before her. Its words are simple, speaking of wheat fields, morning dew, and the strength of hands. Their son leans against her shoulder, eyes heavy, the soft rise and fall of breath already slowing into sleep. As he sits, the baker lets his gaze wander not across the room, but through time. In the quiet, thoughts have space to move. He remembers his father's bakery, long since shuttered, and the way his father's hands could flip a loaf in the oven without looking. He remembers the dusty roads that brought them to Rome when times grew hard in the countryside. The sacrifices made, the debts repaid, the fire rekindled, and he wonders, too, about the future. Will his son take up the paddle and the millstone? Will he learn to test dough with his fingers, to feel the right humidity in the air, to know when an oven is too hot or too cool just by the color of its stones? Or will he follow a different path, one not marked by flour and ash? Will he stand in a toga before magistrates, or walk the hills as a shepherd? The baker does not know, but he understands this. Bread is not only made from grain and fire, it is made from memory, from repetition, from presence. And whatever path his son takes, the warmth of this room, the rhythm of kneading and baking, will live in him like an ember. Outside, a soft breeze stirs the fig leaves that grow beside the alley. A distant dog barks. The moon rises over the rooftops pale and round, like a perfectly shaped loaf. The city exhales. Fires die down. Streets empty. And for a while there is peace. But even in sleep, the city's appetite endures. Somewhere, a soldier, finishing his patrol, tears a chunk of bread from a cloth-wrapped bundle. A mother soothes a crying child with a piece soaked in milk. A scholar, bent over scrolls, nibbles distractedly at a sesame roll as he writes. And in the bakery, a faint glow still lingers in the oven, a promise. Before long, it will be time to rise again, to sweep the ash, to stir the flour, to wake the fire. The baker knows this and welcomes it. The cycle is eternal. It is not labor, is a liturgy. At the end of the day, beneath the vast Roman sky and the quiet flicker of oil lamps, the baker rests, not in luxury, nor in idleness, but in fulfillment. His work does not make him famous. It earns no statues, no songs, but it sustains the life of the city. Every loaf, every crust, every soft center carries with it the warmth of the hearth, the strength of the hands that made it, and the invisible thread that ties Rome's people, rich and poor, citizen and slaven, to one. As sleep overtakes him, the ember in the hearth continues to glow, soft, constant, waiting. Tomorrow will come. The grain will be ground, the dough will rise, and Rome, hungry as ever, will be fed once more. Rome sleeps beneath a sky of stars, its stones still warm with the fire of the day. The echoes of footsteps, laughter, and labor melt into the silence of night. And in a small bakery, tucked between alleys and arches, a single ember glows. It is more than heat, it is memory of hands that rose before the sun, of dough folded with care, of loaves that carried the weight of tradition. The baker's work is never finished, but neither is the city. As long as Rome endures, so too will its bread, so too will the flame. You have walked beside him, heard the crackle of the oven, felt the pulse of the dough, and now, as the ember dims and your eyes grow heavy, let the rhythm of ancient Rome lull you to rest. Good night, and may your dreams rise softly, like bread in the warmth of morning.